Welcome to a new edition of Resilience Talks. I am your host, Cristian Ghita, and it is my pleasure to be able to talk today with a leading journalist in cybersecurity, AI, and smart cities, writing for a very popular German publication, the Tagesspiegel. So, Mr. Johannes Steger, it's our pleasure to welcome you here in Bucharest and to our show.
Thank you very much.
So, you are here in Bucharest as one of the key experts discussing at a seminar that has been organized within the framework of a very interesting European project, eCybridge, which aims to create connections between cyber defense in the civil and in the defense sector. Now, by the end of this project, the institutions that are involved in it aim to organize something like 63 public events. They aim to publish handbooks, resilience materials, white papers, and so on. But the most important outcome that they project is a European-wide network involving more than 150 organizations in at least 18 member states, which I think is going to be very important in enhancing the dialogue between institutions, raising alarms when one of them perceives something, and generally raise the level of awareness and ability to catch cyber threats and mitigate the danger. So I think this is very important, and we are grateful that you are bringing in your expertise to discuss these matters. So this reminds us that the vulnerabilities really are everywhere in this new age. And in your opinion, what is the most promising target for cyber criminals? Is it the architecture of the systems that we are using, or is it the inabilities, let's call them inabilities and not stupidity, of the people who are using it? Is it the hardware or the human element that is most vulnerable? And the flip side of the question is, of course, where do we direct most of our efforts into creating better systems or in educating the public?
So I think it's the answer is differs a little bit. So I think today you can't really differ if it's the hardware or the person in front of the screen who is the greatest vulnerability. I think it's both. I think the systems, if we look at like the weak spots in systems that are still open, and they are kept open by several, how can I say it, institutions for their own purposes. This is one problem, that especially 0 days are not patched immediately, because there's also an interest by state-owned actors to keep them open. That's the one thing. I think we have also the problem with the educational, that people need to patch their things, that they are not educated enough. But to be quite honest, I think one of the main problems is the system itself. So when we think about a password, it's super inhuman. It's not like meant to, it's like, how can you need to change it like every day. But who can remember this? And I remember I talked to someone from the hospital, and he said, well, can you imagine, we have like a computer here, and it's super sensitive data. But like 10 people need to use it. Like the doctor, the nurse, everyone needs to use it. So how can you expect people that are encouraging in saving people's lives or helping people to remember a password? So it's like on the screen, the password is there. It's like there is a post-it, which is like, wow, why? But what else can you do? So I think we need to talk more about it, that how we make a system human-friendly. And I think making a system human-friendly would help us all, like getting the systems more secure, and also educate the people better, because they have like a natural understanding. So I think the psychological and also the behavioral aspect of cybersecurity is often undervalued, and we need to do that more.
So one solution would be for systems to be created by people other than nerds.
Yeah. I think, I'm realizing that everyone who spends enough time in cybersecurity becomes a nerd. So I didn't expect it, but I'm practically a nerd now. So yes, I think it's a lot about interdisciplinarity. So there are some institutions in Germany that also include like behavioral science, for example, or people from organizational psychology. So how can a business evolve in order to make security more human-friendly? And I think this is the key. The key is interdisciplinarity. And let me say one thing. I think it's also crazy that you are, or me, clicking a different link can like crash an entire business. Which is like, why? So also thinking about why is this one person this human, why is it so much power to destroy something? Isn't that right? Isn't this a little bit unfriendly to humans? So I think this is also an aspect we need to talk about.
Yeah, indeed. So in your assessment, are state actors or non-state actors the main threats that we are facing today?
Also, this answer is not like very specific, but I think it depends. So, and it depends also on, can you really tell who is who? So we have, for example, there has been a warning in Germany by the Secret Service, for the Interior Secret Service, about IT workers from North Korea.
It is?
Who apply for positions, remote positions, and are now getting access to like company data. That's super dangerous for the company, but these IT workers also taking these goods for the North Korean regime. So is it now a state? It's kind of a state actor, but it affects the business. So what's like state or non-state? And if you see a lot of criminals are acting from the safe harbors, well, they wouldn't do that if the local government wouldn't say, well, it's okay. So I think the differentiation is becoming more and more unclear these days. And of course, APT groups are super dangerous. We saw this Salt Typhoon thing in the United States. We also see different actors in Germany accessing companies and stealing data and stealing intellectual property. But I think the differentiation is not that possible anymore.
Right. Okay. So because cyber attacks are notoriously hard to attribute, and this really incentivizes countries like Russia, like North Korea that you've mentioned, China, to include cyber attacks in their hybrid toolbox. Do you think that this would, at some point, have to be taken more seriously by military alliances like NATO? Do you foresee a future where a cyber attack could trigger an Article 5 in NATO?
I think if we talk about a black swan scenario, it could. I think when we look at the current situation, we saw that, or I think that we saw, especially when it comes from Russia, we didn't see like the big attack. At least I didn't see it, which is maybe someone else saw it, but I didn't see it. What we saw are like small stitches with like denial of service attacks. They're particularly the one that we saw, they're not dangerous. It was like just a website of the police crashing, or like several airport websites weren't online for like 2 hours. That's not dangerous. And it wouldn't evoke an article like a defense article. But it's like small stitches, eroding trust in society and in institutions. Why is the police not online? What does it mean for me when I'm like robbed or something like that? But it wouldn't evoke the article. So I think that's also part of the strategy, being below this and now like stitching, and we can't evoke this article, obviously. It's like, and we saw it, for example, in Albania, where supposedly, allegedly Iranian actors crashed the systems that could have evoked it, but they didn't. And I think it's something you need to be very, very precise and very, very careful when it's the time to do so. Eventually, in a black swan scenario, it could evoke it. I think so too. Yeah.
But you have to be really precise about attributing.
Yeah.
Finding the tools to actually attribute.
Yes.
The attack. But the fact that we have a threshold.
Yeah.
Doesn't that encourage malign actors to actually needle us just below that point and create enough inconvenience to slow things down or erode trust, like you said?
Yeah, and it's like the imminent exercise or the imminent to do for us is to think about how do we counter that. And I think it's not countering by a so-called hackback or something like that. I think it's countered in building resilience and enabling regulation, for example, here in Romania, to counter platforms like TikTok and to think about how can we address threats that come within these systems. That's a regulative part, but it's also a resilient part of education on different levels, bringing people together from different disciplines and to make the stitches like that we don't feel it that strongly.
Yeah. This brings us very nicely to the fact that we as an organization, the Euro-Atlantic Resilience Center, works within the framework of the Romanian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So I'd like to next ask you about cyber diplomacy and the efforts of various entities to come together and create the regulatory framework that you have been mentioning. Of course, there is legislation at state level, but because these threats are never localized and we are facing an international phenomenon, it's clear that we need to create a more general understanding. We could do that with Geneva, with the Geneva treaties regulating warfare, of all things. Do you think it is possible to come together as a planet and establish some ground rules for the cyber field?
I think it's $1 million question. I think we need to start within our value-based community, which is Europe, which is Western alliances. And I think when we look at something I would like to name as an example is the counter-ransomware initiative established by the Biden administration. That's a great thing, actually, because there are a lot of like-minded countries from different parts of the world coming together and really trying to create things, measurements that help and also that counter ransomware or the threats. For example, Israel and the UAE worked on a portal, an information sharing portal, which is great because this is something we need. Germany and Nigeria worked on cyber capacity building, establishing in countries that are not that developed in this field, helping them to get more resilient. I think this is a great thing that like internationally is conducted to make societies more resilient. And there is also regulation that I think are a great example for that. Cyber Resilience Act, for example, which is this thinking of security by design, making it a principle in Europe. It's a start, but it's a good start, actually. And so I think...
But it's still somewhat local.
Yeah, it's local, but I think we need to start on a European level with kind of these things. And last example, the Ministry report from the former Finnish president for the European Commission, he proposed a joint secret service for Europe, which, of course, the states are not that happy about it, but I think it's a good approach. It's like bringing information sharing, which is super important. And we need to start on European level. As long as we are not united on a European level, we can forget about internationally, I think. So this is just...
So you see things with things moving forward.
Yeah.
With leading by example, with various countries like the United States or Europe showing a path forward that we can then try to replicate bilaterally by agreements with other countries.
Yes.
Do you think there's a place for the United Nations to take a leading role in this? Or
I would love to, but I'm not convinced that it's possible because we have like some actors or representatives in the UN that are, as you said, not known for being that cooperative in enhancing or fighting cyber threats.
Right. In order to be able to push a global agenda, you have to demonstrate abilities. Do you think that the Euro-Atlantic countries, Europe, the United States, Canada, and like-minded countries have what it takes to set the bar? Are they really cyber resilient as nations?
I think looking at current events, I would say no. But I think they have this potential, and I think there are a lot of efforts, and I think you have to just put the dots together at the moment. And there are great cooperations between the states, between disciplines. And for example, the center is something that is an example on how you can form public-private partnerships within the initiative of a government or public sector. And I think this is something really important that each and every country in this field you mentioned could provide. It's like we have the capabilities, we could be super resilient, I think, and we could lead by example, but we have to connect the dots, and we have to be willing also to let go of some national interests that are often driven by national egoism.
And talking about that, do you think there is a way to achieve global AI governance? And the segue question would be, do states really have the instruments to enforce a global AI governance, even if they could somehow agree between themselves that these are the ground rules? Because this is a field that seems to be driven by private companies rather than by the public sector.
There are some efforts, the Bletchley Park Summit last year, I guess, and invited by UK and France, the Safety Summit, and now there's the French event coming up. I think there are great initiatives, and to be honest, what else can you do? It's like you can't sit there and just watch it happen. I think sometimes it's also we need to be willing to do it, because for example, the European Union has instruments like the Digital Service Act. When we talk about X becoming dangerous or whatever you might call it, you have the instruments, you need to use it, and you need to be bold to use it. And you have to be the willingness to use it. And I think even if it's not possible to get an overall regulation or conduct of behavior for AI, there need to be a stand. And I think Europe, for example, developing a position to this is super important. Even if it's not, if it won't change a lot, it's important to have it and to have a position on it.
Indeed. And perhaps it's Europe and the United States are in a better position to advance these things just because they are such important markets. They have a certain weight that companies cannot ignore in the way that they could ignore, for example, Nicaragua or just small countries, small markets. It was interesting to see Brazil taking action against X.
Super good example.
And this is something that the world should be looking at and seeing how the interplay between state actors and private actors can regulate a market.
Yeah, and they weren't afraid, kind of. And it's funny because you would say, well, Brazil, it's like one country and not like the whole of South America, but it was taking a bold stand. And I think this is something that I would like to see more in Europe. There's a German word, I try to translate it, it's called making yourself a dwarf. And I think Europe tends to be sometimes
punching below the weight.
It's like dwarfing itself and becoming more bold in stance of talking to big tech. Why not? So we are a big market. We are a big market. We have political power. We just need to be united to use it. And I think it's super important. Defending our democracy will take the willingness to be united. And it's it's really critical point now to get it done now.
Indeed. Indeed. So how do you see the interplay between AI and cybersecurity? A lot of people are worried, even afraid, that AI is going to be driving cybercrime to a level that maybe we're not ready for. So what's your view on this?
I would like to give you an insight look in my Outlook email account, because I get like several mails every day it differs between we are all gonna die and this is the solution to all your problems.
Yeah.
Both selling products with AI, or at least they tell me that this. So, and there is no middle.
Not to mention the spam.
Yeah, the spam. Of course, that's like a whole other thing. But it's like we need to get the hype out of the discussion and the debate about AI. I think this is dangerous because we have people that are very, especially companies or not that educated companies, small and medium-sized businesses that are just hearing AI is so dangerous, blah, 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 or it will solve all your problems. The problems will be solved if you do updates, if you patch your systems. Start with this. And this is super important that we don't lose the people over this AI hype. There are good examples on how AI will be dangerous, can be dangerous. Social engineering. It's super important to think. There are also people that say, well, AI can write malicious code. Yeah, that's super dangerous. But let's not forget it can also help us. So when we talk about it, calm down and let's figure out what is really dangerous for us and what isn't and how it can help us and not get lost in the buzzword bingo.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much. This has been a very insightful discussion.
Thanks for having me.
So it's a great pleasure to have you here. I wish you a great seminar in the Cyber project. And to you, dear listeners, we'll be waiting for you at the next episode of Resilience Talks. Thank you.
Thank you.